Marion, Iowa, which is in east central Iowa. We opened our doors in July of 2020 and have been serving our community since then through events, virtual events like this, in-person events, and of course, having our lovely shop of 360 square feet open to our community and online at swampfoxbookstore.com. We are delighted today to host this international event for you. Penny Haw is joining us from South Africa, where they're slowly moving into spring as we move into fall here in the Northern Hemisphere. And we've got Terah Shelton Harris, who is joining us from the Eastern time zone here in the United States. So let me tell you just a little bit about both of them, and then we'll turn it over to Terah to take over and lead this lovely event for us. So Terah Shelton Harris is the author and collection development librarian based in Alabama and a freelance writer. She has been published in Women's Health, Natural Solutions, Every Day with Rachel Ray, Backpacker Draft, and Women's Adventure. She is the author of One Summer in Savannah, which came out earlier this year. Penny Haw is a longtime journalist and columnist and latter-day author. She has written for many leading South African newspapers and magazines for more than 3 decades. The Wilderness Between Us was her debut contemporary novel for adults, and The Invincible Miss Cuss was her debut historical fiction novel. Today, we are celebrating the release of The Woman at the Wheel, which came out here today, and as I mentioned, Penny lives in Cape Town, South Africa. So welcome, and Terah, take it away.
Yay! Hello. Hi and welcome. Again, my name is Terah Harris, and I have the honor and the pleasure of being in conversation today with the brilliant Penny Haw, whose new book, I have to show it again, sorry, The Woman at the Wheel, came out today, which tells the story of the life of Bertha Benz, who is the wife of the father of the automobile, Carl Benz. So hi, Penny. How are you?
Hi, Terah. I'm absolutely fine. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for doing this for me.
Of course. I love this book so much. So how are you feeling today? The launch of a new book?
Yeah, it's been very
nervous?
exciting. It's been like a birthday, you know. So
like
many
that.
messages and such excitement. A little bit of trepidation, you know. It's out there now. It's no longer mine. It's now in the hands of readers for them to make what they will of it. But I've had a wonderful day, and
Well,
yeah.
you have nothing to be nervous about. This was an amazing book, which is why we're here. We're here to discuss this book. So, Penny, just to give you an idea, I have a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you. And then no spoilers. Anybody that has not read the book, we will not be doing any spoilers. This is a spoiler-free conversation. So I will ask some questions, no spoilers, and I will leave some time at the end in case you have any questions. I'll also be monitoring the chat, so you can pop your questions into there. Okay, so without further ado, Penny, let's get started.
Yeah.
So I'm reading from my notes. So you've written 2 works of biological fiction. What is it about this genre that appeals to you? Or is it just easier to write a story based on the lives of real people rather than creating fiction?
That's a question that I get asked quite often. And it's interesting that people think it must be easier to write about real people rather than creating completely fictional characters. But actually, I think it's more difficult because you have to be very respectful of the subject, and you have to be very careful of the research and getting things accurate to a degree, but also making sure that your story is as entertaining as possible. And I think the reason that I'm so drawn to these kind of people, like Bertha Benz, and my first story was about Aileen Cust, who was the first woman veterinary surgeon in Britain and Ireland, is that history has some of the best stories. So you come across these extraordinary people who were real, who lived these extraordinary lives, and who have maybe gone under the radar. And I'm very drawn to that. And I think my journalism background makes me enjoy the research. I love that. But more than anything, I love the idea of looking at truth and introducing it to people who maybe would never read it in a nonfiction form. So you're having a chance of the cliche is breathing life into history in a sense, and I think that's what draws me to it. And also, as I say, I mean, the history is full of these stories that if you wrote them as pure fiction, people might even say they're unbelievable. But when you find out that they're actually based on truth, it makes them even more compelling. So yeah, it's and I want to celebrate these remarkable women, actually, these remarkable women in history who have basically gone under the radar. So that's what draws me to it.
I love that you said celebrate that, because one of the things that I love about both of your books is that they feature these strong, interesting women that, like you said, may have fallen underneath, the radar. But it's so fascinating to get a glimpse into their lives, because both of these women, I'll be honest with you, before I read your books, I didn't know anything about them. But I am very curious, how did you come across Bertha Benz? How did you find her?
Yeah, I was doing some work as a journalist many years ago, and I needed to. I was working on some articles about women in engineering and technology and in science, in history, and I came across a story about now I know you said no spoilers, but it's so difficult not to have spoilers in this kind of story.
Maybe just a little spoiler.
Yeah, a little bit. I came across the story, a very short piece about Bertha Benz' road trip in the Motorwagen in 1888. And when I read that, she made this extraordinary trip across between Mannheim and Pforzheim. It was 106 kilometers one way, and she drove it back again in this relatively untested little vehicle. And she made this trip with her 2 teenage sons. And when I read that piece, I thought, well, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, because it's completely unlikely that anyone, let alone a 30-something-year-old woman, would undertake such a journey if she didn't know a whole lot about the machine and about the workings of the machine. And she must also be an extraordinarily adventurous woman. And so it triggered my interest. I was like, there's a lot more to the story. But that really was all there was. And so when the opportunity came to do more research, I jumped at the opportunity, and obviously led me into the world of Bertha, where I discovered that I was right. There's a whole lot more to Bertha.
There is a lot, yes.
On the car,
yeah. I want to get into some things that I discovered in the beginning part of the book. I want to discuss the significance of Unfortunately Only a Girl Again, which I read that and I thought, oh my goodness, could you imagine reading that that your father wrote underneath her birth announcement, unfortunately a girl again. Can you discuss that and the impact that addendum had on Bertha's life?
Yeah. So Bertha was 10 years old when she saw that. And, so she was old enough to be quite independent and be able to form opinions and to have independent thought and what have you. So to see something like that, and especially I think the impact for her was that she was very close to her father. And the reason he'd written was Unfortunately Only a Girl Again was because she was the third child, and at that point they were all girls. And obviously in the 1800s, he was hoping for an heir. And the devastation of seeing that. I mean, I imagined it myself. I was very close to my father. And I imagined how I would have felt if I'd seen those words written next to my name. It would have shocked me. And I think
especially considering that he didn't. There was 2 prior sisters, and he didn't write any of that underneath theirs, but just hers.
Yeah. Because I guess the other 2, Emily and Elise, were still something of a novelty. But by the time the third one came along, he was like, oh no, not a girl.
Right.
But I think for Bertha, because she was such a curious, intelligent child, and and even at that young age was spending a lot of time with her father, who was a master builder in Forsheim, and she was intrigued by his business. It was at a time when the train was just being rolled out across Europe, and it was still a fascinating technology. And Bertha was enthralled by all of these things. She asked him about his work the whole time. She went to his building sites whenever she could, and he loved to talk to her about his work. He
Yeah.
was very pleased that someone was interested in it. But then for her, and she imagined they had this bond, and then for her to see those words, I think it was an absolute shock. And I think that she, at the age of 10, it was probably the first time that she'd encountered the fact that being female was a disadvantage. And I think that the sense of betrayal that she must have had must have been very big. But the one question that I asked myself when I was writing the book was how that spurred her on in future life. Did it actually make her even more determined to live a life of purpose, the life of more than was expected of women at that stage? Or would she always have been like that? I thought that was a very interesting thing, whether it spurred her on or whether she just, followed her destiny as she would have anyway.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question, which is about her relationship with her mother, which is Mutter, and talk a little bit about Mutter's life, but Mutter's role in Bertha's life. And I want to say I was really struck by the "everything a girl learns is useless" comment. That was I'm going to try to find the passage, and I just remember reading it, and I stopped, and I just I was like, oh my goodness, it was Let me try to find it. Hold on 1 second. She said, "So we must sew and learn to manage servants and run a house." And she said, "Ja, that's right." She said, "Everything else a girl learns is useless and for some misleading." Like, can you talk a little bit about Mutter's role and what that, could have had kind of impact that could have had on Bertha?
Yeah. So when Bertha was born, neither of her parents were born wealthy, but they were both, by the time Bertha and her siblings came along, they were a wealthy family in Forsheim. And Forsheim was a very a burgeoning city, and her father was doing very well. And Mutter, Bertha's mother, was actually grew up on a farm. She grew up in the country, and she had spent her life as a very traditional girl's upbringing of that day and age. She was barely educated, and she worked with the animals. And when when her children were born, Bertha's father wanted them to go to school, and he was actually very progressive in terms of sending his daughters to a prestigious school. But his motivation was a bit skewed, because the reason he was sending them, because he was an ambitious man and a bit of a social climber. And the reason he was sending his girls there was not necessarily to get a great education, but so that they would mix with wealthy families, so that they would make good marriages. So Bertha's mother knew that, and she was worried that that getting a good education would be misleading for her daughters. And she was right with Bertha. That Bertha didn't realize that she was not going to school to fill her, to educate her and to feed her curiosity, but to make a good marriage. It was a bit appalling. And so that was why Mutter said everything else a woman learns is useless, because she believed that you'll end up in the home anyway. You'll end up living a traditional life of a woman, raising children and looking after the home. So she was quite frustrated by her husband essentially misleading the daughters to believing that there was more to life, which was actually quite sad.
Yeah. Which, it leads me to another part there were so many moments in here that I have marked because of different things. And it was something else that's it's kind of in keeping it to that part. She was talking about it was not only the men who did not appeal to me. Every introduction and every accompanying anticipation in my parents' eyes reminded me that my worth would be measured according to the man who would have me. I just thought, oh my goodness, could you imagine? So yeah, that's kind of in keeping with that prior question
Yes.
about the everything a woman that a girl learns is useless. So you mentioned that Mother grew up amongst the animals and the horses, and there was a scene in this book regarding a horse. And Mother makes a comment that just, again, it was one of those put down moments. And let me just savor that and try to decipher that. But I don't have to, because I can ask you what you meant by that. So discuss the parallel between what happened with the horse and the "we need their power" comment, because it felt so symbolic to me. I felt like the horse maybe could have been women in society, or the wife, or the role of women in society. So is that true? Was I looking into that too much?
I actually didn't mean that, but women. I mean, horses. Horses in many cultures, horses are symbolic of freedom, and so there's definitely a sense of freedom and power there. And I was thinking, as you're talking now, I was thinking about that, and I think, maybe subconsciously I was thinking that, but Bertha's mother's. She was very cynical about her daughter's education, but she was a real dreamer when it came to animals, particularly horses. And having grown up in the country, and I mean, someone who's seen horses in the countryside when they are running free, or especially a group of horses, when they suddenly gallop free, and they are so playful and they are so magnificent and powerful. And Bertha's mother, I had that image of horses from the country, and it disturbed her greatly when she saw horses being mistreated. And of course, this was a time when horses were used for everything. They were used for transport, they were used in agriculture, they were used to fight wars, and horses were everywhere. And so I think that Bertha's mother felt. She resented the fact that these animals had to be harnessed, and there's the other scene where she actually rebukes the carriage rider for mistreating the horses. So her feeling was very much more of a passionate feeling of about the animals.
Really thought that you were making a connection between like how joyful
well, the
women were
interesting
in the
thing there, I mean,
horses.
I mean that line of "we need their power." Of course,
Yes.
she didn't know that the idea of horsepower would become such a central theme to her daughter's life. I mean, that is the measurement of the output of an engine, which is what Bertha and Carl eventually focused on. So there's a bit of irony there too, I guess.
That's why I thought it was intentional. Yeah. I said, "Oh my goodness, this is so wise. This is so great. I have to ask her about this." And then you're like, "Oh no, wasn't." So that's good. Well, I want you to know that's the way I took it. That's the way I read it. So I hope that anybody's watching.
I'm happy with
that. That's a great thing. So let's talk a little bit about the sisterhood and friendship and our themes throughout this book. So discuss why these are important on Bertha's life and to the story as well.
Yeah. So Bertha was very close to her sisters, her older sisters, particularly Elise, who was the one just older than her. And they both moved when they got married. They both moved to the USA, to America. So she felt their loss greatly. And throughout the book, she continues to write to Elise, and it's very important to me because I want, I wanted Bertha to have a life away from Carl, and to have someone that she could confide in about things that that were happening, that maybe she felt that she couldn't necessarily confront directly with him. So the sisters, and then her friendship with Ava, which came a bit later, were very important to me for the book, because I think that we all need these outlets, and she needed to have these women figures to confide in. And the other thing that I felt was important about the friendships and the sisterhood was that Bertha often recognized that she was different from her sisters and her friend. And the way they responded to her sometimes took her by surprise. And for me, it was a nice way of showing how independent she was, how unusual she was, how remarkable she was. And so the friendships was a very important part of it. And then Bertha also formed a friendship with a journalist, a male journalist, Benjamin Stern. And that to me was very important as well. And I found that I had the same feelings when I was writing The Invincible Miscast, and the research I was doing was that, women who have fought patriarchy and who have overcome all sorts of obstacles, they are always so keen to acknowledge the men that stood by them in those parts. And the journalist who was essentially on Bertha's side here was very much a man who didn't see gender. He was just excited about their invention of the motorwagen. And so that was why the friendships were very important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that. I felt that. So let's talk a little bit about Bertha and Carl. Okay. So Bertha is intrigued by Carl's vision, of course, the moment he describes that when they meet. However, there's something else that draws her to him, something that speaks to her character. Would you like to explain a little bit about that?
So, I mean, I love the fact that that Bertha's parents were so set on marrying her to a wealthy, well-to-do man, and there came this incredibly intelligent and ambitious inventor who had no money and just had big dreams. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel that she fell in love with his vision as much as she fell in love with him. But the thing that I think she saw about Carl was that he accepted her as a woman of intelligence, and he respected her opinion. He realized very early on in their relationship that she understood what he was doing. He didn't have to patronize her, and I think one of the reasons that Carl was like that was because he was raised by his mother. His father died when he was a baby, and he was raised by his mother, who, although Bertha never met her, was by all accounts a very strong woman herself. And so Carl was not sexist. He was not. He didn't have traditional expectations of Bertha, and I think she fell in love with that because she recognized that they would have an equal partnership. So I think that was what drew her to him, and perhaps she realized that he would not be someone who would write, unfortunately, only a girl again next to anyone's name. Yeah, so I think that's what drew her to him.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. So shortly after Bertha and Carl are married, she thinks, I want to get this right, it would take more than being a genius to realize a dream. What does she mean as she comes to this conclusion about Carl?
Yeah. So Carl was an incredible student by all accounts. I mean, he had his degrees at a very young age. He was ambitious. He was a very hardworking man, but he had his shortcomings. One of the recurring problems that they had while they were trying to develop the motorwagen was that they didn't have enough money. And I mean, they I mean, it was an extraordinary project. If you consider that they were inventing this thing, and if for every component they had to design and build it themselves. I mean, it was just an extraordinary project. But they needed investors. So they didn't have the money. They needed investors. But the problem was that Carl was impatient, and he was quite intolerant of people who didn't get his vision and didn't understand, I think, his engineering brain as quickly as they should. So, so Bertha recognized that when the first partnership failed, and that was actually when she realized that it would take more than a genius, because she realized that there were some gaps in his abilities that she could fulfill, and that was when she recognized that if they were going to succeed, she was going to have to bridge the gaps and try to build the relationships with some of the partners that Carl couldn't do. I think he could be quite hot-headed, so he wanted to, everyone was an idiot and wanted to throw in things quite quickly and immediately change course and what have you. And Bertha realized quite early that she'd have to quietly rein him in and fill some of those gaps that were needed.
Yeah, an absolute true partnership, as they say. There's always that balance.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question about writing and what you appreciated and what you liked about this book. What's been what was some of your favorite scenes that you enjoyed, that you like to write?
I love the scene with the horse and with Mutter, the one that we were talking about earlier there.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I love writing about animals, so I love that. But I also loved writing the journey. And I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the journey, because I think that is kind of it could be quite a spoiler. But that for me was, there was some adventure there. I loved that. But what I also enjoyed doing is that because I for 9 years I ran my own business, and I also worked for many more years than that as a journalist for a business newspaper. So I've written a lot about business and what have you. So I really enjoyed writing about the entrepreneurial and the business side of their partnership. And that was really enjoyable. And one of the early readers of the manuscript said to me afterwards that he was struck by how many of the challenges that Bertha and Carl faced are still recurring in businesses and small businesses or startups in this day and age. And he said to me, every business needs a Bertha. And
that's right. I like that.
Yeah, it was so interesting for me, because you think all these years have passed, and obviously the industries are different but businesses are still about people, and so the people issues still they're still the same essentially. So I loved that. I loved The Invincible Miscast was such a joy for me to write because of the animals. I absolutely loved the animals, but The Woman at the Wheel was an equal joy, because I felt like I was kind of getting into the heart of what it must have been like to start a business, to create this extraordinary machine that people were terrified of because it was noisy and smoky and what have you. They thought it was the devil's business. They thought Carl was completely eccentric, and yet for Carl and Bertha to persevere and to believe that that this could happen is just extraordinary. And I think it keeps happening in this day and age as well.
Which leads me to something else in regards to your research methods and the things that you do as far as research. How do you not get lost in researching. It's like the business side of it, and then their relationship, and then her relationship with her parents, and then her relationship with her sisters. How do you just not get lost in research and is able to just kind of stay focused on what you want to do?
Yeah. It's you can go down rabbit holes, that's for sure. With this book, there wasn't a lot of firsthand stuff. Carl Benz wrote a very small autobiography, which I had translated, and so yeah, I guess it's another throwback to having worked as a journalist. I know at some stage, pull yourself away and just write the words. But it's in fact the project that I'm working on now is I'm utterly fascinated by it. I could study it for 5 years. I'm so fascinated by it. But you got to pull yourself back and say, where's the story? It's
right.
wonderful to have all this information, but where is the story? And it's a difficult one. And I think it's also, for me, it's quite a difficult thing to get the balance right with, because there are things that you get very interested in. You know how the more you learn about something, the more interested you get in it. But it's quite difficult to pull yourself back and go, I'm not going to tell everyone this just because I find it interesting.
because I had to learn it. Everyone's got to learn it too.
Exactly.
I love the balance. I love that we had like this peek into like her early childhood, and then it kind of, like you said, the journey. The journey kind of along with it. It was a perfect balance. You did not stay in one particular area of research for long. So I will say that. But you make reference to a lot of animals. So I want to ask you about that, because I kind of want to make reference to your previous historical fiction, The Invincible Miss Cust, which is about, the British and the Ireland's first veterinary surgeon, which I love that book so much. Thank you. As well as telling her story. It underlines your love for animals. That's very obvious. If you don't know that, Penny, it's very obvious that you love animals. And so while The Woman at the Wheel features horses and the 3 dogs, who are important characters, it's not centered on animals. It's about the automobile. But are you something of a petrol head?
a petrol head who loves animals. The short answer is no. I'm not a petrol head.
No.
I'm very lucky to be married to an engineer. So he helped me a great deal with that technical stuff. But I certainly got very interested in the development of the internal combustion engine, and the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke, and I got very interested in it, but really just for the research purposes. I'm not a petrol head. I don't really care what I drive as long as it goes. But I was certainly fascinated by the incredible vision, actually, of creating something out of nothing. I mean, their vision was to create a horseless carriage, and essentially, I guess that was the Motorwagen. Still looks a bit like a carriage, even though it's got 3 wheels and what have you, and people will see it on the cover of the book. But it was just such an extraordinary thing that someone could say, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to keep working on it, and that they worked together to create it. And as I said, it wasn't that I was interested in Bertha because of the car. I was interested in Bertha because of her being an extraordinary woman. So yeah,
I was curious, but definitely your love for animals is very obvious in your 2 books. So I just want to make sure and a petrol head, that's a very unique phrase for what we would call like a car enthusiast or someone that just loves cars. So that I love that term, petrol head. That's pretty cool.
Oh, you don't use the petrol head?
No, I would. If I was talking about someone that loves cars, I would say a car enthusiast. My son loves cars, and so we just said or call him a gearhead. We call
Okay.
him a gearhead or, you know, a car enthusiast. So I love that
Okay.
turn of phrase. So I'm going to, there's a couple of questions in the chat,
Yeah.
Penny. So I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you. So Megan, hi
Hello,
Megan.
Megan.
Megan says she has two questions. This is exactly in keeping with Megan. How do you know when you have found an interesting historical woman that you want to write a book about them? Ooh, that's a good question, Megan.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I think they're women that I relate to. I mean, for certainly, Aileen Cust. I just loved the idea of her wanting to work with animals. I could relate to that very, very easily. And then when one reads as much as you can, whatever is available, if you can see that there is an arc to the story, if you can, you know, yeah, I guess it's like any subject really for a book, if it excites you. And Bertha excited me because I think from that moment that I read the little bit about that journey, and then I thought, but this woman didn't just wake up one morning and jump on this motorwagen and go, okay, I'm going to travel across Germany. There's a great deal more behind it. So it's about finding a subject that really fascinates me, and yeah, I just that's really, and you know, if I can wedge some animals in there too, it also helps.
I love that. So Megan had a second question. Can you talk about your writing process, and do you adhere to a daily routine, or are you a pantser or a plotter? Ooh, good question, Megan.
Yeah, pantser and a plotter. I'm a bit of both. I try to set out. I mean, you and I were discussing synopsises earlier. I try to set out a plan beforehand, but I also love the playfulness of being able to pants a bit along the way. So I'm a combination of both. My writing routine, I'm very business-alike about my writing. I think because I've worked as a journalist all my life, I set myself deadlines. I am very fortunate at the moment to be able to focus on my fiction. So I don't. I'm no longer doing journalism. I'm working entirely on fiction. So that's very lucky. But I'm yeah, I treat writing very much like a job because it's been a job for me all my life. And because most of my career has been working as a freelance journalism, you know, um, it's about setting yourself goals and deadlines and sitting down and doing the writing. So I have a beautiful office. I love being in my office. My family complains that I spend far too much time up here, but I absolutely love the place. So my writing routine is, you know, I wake up, I take my dogs for a walk, and then I get to my desk and I write. And sometimes I only leave it in the evenings again. So yeah.
So I'm curious. This is kind of an addendum to Mega's question. So from the time that you discover these women, and to the end of the book, how long is that? Like, how long does it really take you to finish? You know, from that first nugget of an idea to when you turn it in.
Both of these ones have been about a year.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And that's very good for historical fiction, considering, like we were talking about, you can kind of get lost in the research and just kind of dive in that. But yeah, you seem very focused. If you can do that in a year, I think I'd just be all over the place with historical fiction. But yeah, that's good that you can do that in a year.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I think that historical fiction is the same as contemporary fiction or other fiction. Is that you know, you really, for me the primary goal is to entertain. And you know, if you don't entertain in your writing, then you lose the reader, and they won't pick up another book of yours. So it really is about trying to find the story and keep people turning pages. And the other thing that I think that I'm very lucky with is that I do understand the importance of researching right the first time, you know, so because you can waste a lot of time in researching. So even when I'm writing that first draft, I try to be as accurate as possible, because you know, so there isn't a lot of backwards and forwards.
Right.
So I check as I write, which is, you know, maybe other authors will say rather, you know, do your fact checking when you have a draft. I actually do my fact checking while I'm writing, so it's working better for me.
Yeah. So there's another question. It says, can you tell me why you or your publisher chose biological fiction rather than historical fiction? I mean,
biographical.
Biographical fiction rather than historical fiction, which, and then
I understand the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that question, but I have another question for you. What is the takeaway? You know, when someone, you know, reads this beautiful book, it's time to show it again, The Woman at the Wheel. What is the biggest takeaway that you want readers to get, you know, from this book?
I think it's what I mentioned a bit earlier. So I love the idea of people finishing the book and going, wow, I would never have known this person if it hadn't been if her story hadn't been told in this form. And I think just going back to the question about biographical fiction versus historical fiction. So this is, strictly speaking, I would describe these The Invincible Miss Cust and The Woman at the Wheel as biographical historical fiction, because they're based on a true story or the thing. So I think I answered that earlier to you, and I said to you that I'm fascinated by real people, because history has some of the best stories, and so I love the idea of looking at the facts and then speculating the whatever is not on public record, whatever we don't know, you know, the emotions, the thoughts, the conversations, the relationships. I love the idea of being able to imagine those, because I'm bringing life to the history. I hope that I'm bringing life to the history. So that's why I like the biographical side of it, because I think that history has the best stories, and that, you know, extraordinary real women should be celebrated this way, and also that it's a way of bringing history to people who might not otherwise encounter it. You know, they don't read nonfiction, or they, you know, this is the way you read the fiction. So that's really why I like to go the biographical route.
Yeah.
There was another question in there as well, and I think I circumnavigated it somehow. No.
I think no, because I think someone just made a comment about the difference that one is a subcategory of another. So is there any other questions? Just pop them in the chat. I am monitoring the chat right now, but let's see. Yeah. So yeah, I think we
there are a couple questions in the Q&A box. So tell us what you're working on next.
Oh, Q&A box. Oh yeah, that's the thing. Sorry. Just found it. Okay, so Erin. Hi, Erin. Hello, Erin. Erin wants to know, tell us what you're writing about next.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
this one is so exciting, and it's about Mary Leakey, who was one of the world's best known female archaeologists and paleoanthropologists who worked. She's British, but she worked predominantly in East Africa, and her story is extraordinary. She I think I'm allowed to give a couple of spoilers here, because it's still a while away. But she was essentially uneducated because of circumstances in her life, and she became one of the world's best known women scientists. And it's largely based in East Africa, in Tanzania, and she's an absolutely fascinating woman. I mean, she is of the ilk of Aileen and Bertha. So She's was a strong, independent, outspoken. Maybe more outspoken than Bertha. Bertha was not as outspoken, but yeah, her story is fascinating, and she was an animal lover too. What can I say?
I was waiting to say, will there be animals? Will animals make an appearance in this one?
Well, she absolutely loved animals, but and this one, what I'm doing with this one is I'm doing a dual timeline with it. So I've got two stories working side by side. So it's a exciting new experience for me, and I hope it's working. It's I'm enjoying it, but I hope it's working.
Oh yeah, I think so. Okay, so Megan has another question. Is there a genre other than historical fiction that you would like to write?
Yes, well, I have written contemporary fiction in the wilderness between us, and I've got a manuscript sitting around somewhere. And yeah, I would love to go back to contemporary fiction at some stage, but I'm in the genre of historical fiction for another 2 novels, and then yeah, we'll see. But I as much as I enjoy the biographical side of it, I also love the playfulness of writing fiction, of pure fiction. So I see myself writing some contemporary fiction at some stage in future years. I hope.
Well, we look forward to it. We definitely look forward to it. Is there anything else? Tell us anything else that you wanted us to know about Women at the Wheel. Maybe something I didn't ask you, or just something that you want the readers, something that the watchers and the readers to know about.
Yeah,
without spoiling it.
No, without spoiling it. Yeah. What can I say about the story? Well, I think for me the most amazing thing is really kind of acknowledging what a big thing it was for Bertha to work alongside Carl, and her acknowledgement of how at some point in the book she actually says that she feels that she needed to stay behind the scenes because Carl was already seen as an eccentric, and and so it was almost as if your wife came out as being part of this eccentric journey, they might face even more ridicule. And I just think that it's such a remarkable thing, and that there must be so many stories like this of women who did these amazing things, and just worked behind the scenes and created incredible things, undertook amazing journeys and adventures, and no one ever knew about them. And I just think that for me, it's such a privilege to be able to tell these kind of stories. It's like such an honor to be able to say, hey, did you know about this person? And if you didn't, would you like to read this and just see how remarkable women have been through the ages? And they were not the women. I mean, in this era, they were not any overt feminist activists. Were definitely not in Bertha's side. Obviously, during Aileen's era, they were the suffragettes. But I just think it's incredible that that feminists have been around for all these times, and even before there was a name for it, there were just these remarkable women doing these remarkable things which most people have never heard of. So that for me is something that I'd love people to feel when they read my books.
Yeah, I like the idea. I think someone told me once that, fiction can educate and we can learn through fiction as well. And I've encountered a lot of people who don't like to read nonfiction. And so what your books do is you're educating and teaching us about these amazing women. And as I was reading this, I just thought, would I ever known about her if I had not picked up this book? And that's what I appreciate, is like I learned something, and now I will never forget her. And I wonder how many other readers will have that same encounter for both of your books, and just like be educated and learn about these amazing women. And then not only that, wonder who else is out there.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
you said, who else is out there that we don't know about? And that kind of makes you a little bit hungry, for that information. So now I'm like, I want to know more about these, these unspoken kind of hidden women in history.
Yeah. I think, I mean, for me, the greatest reward is for someone to say to me, wow, I'd never heard of this woman, and thanks for introducing me to her.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's exactly how I felt. And there were so
thank
many
you.
touching and warm moments in this. So many things that I underlined and I highlighted just, for reference. So thank you. So let me be the first on your launch day to say thank you so much for introducing me to Bertha and for this beautiful book. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Terah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Terah, for hosting this and leading us on this wonderful journey and introducing us. For those of us that haven't had a chance to read the book yet, introduce us to Bertha and her family. And Penny, thank you so much for joining us. I'm assuming it's already tomorrow there, since when we started, you said it was near midnight. Thank you for staying up late and celebrating the release of The Woman at the Wheel. Show it one more time. You can get your copy of Penny's books or Terah at your local independent bookseller. Or you can also purchase them at bookshop.org. Either way, we'll support independent bookstores like ours. For anybody that's doesn't have an independent bookstore near them, we do ship within the United States. So we'd be happy to ship you a copy of either Terah or Penny's books, or any book you might find on our site that interests you. Thank you again. This replay will be available on YouTube and Facebook shortly. So if you had to jump out or need to watch more later or want to rewatch it, it's out there on the interwebs for you to grab. So thank you again, and good luck, Penny, and good luck, Terah, with your next book.
Thank you.
Bye, Penny.
Much. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Terah. Bye-bye.
Welcome.
Thank you.